welcome to the May statewide call of the California Alliance for Community Energy. As most of you know, the mission of the Alliance is to support and defend community choice and other local clean energy programs that advance local clean energy for the environmental, economic, and social justice benefits of our communities. I am Erica Morgan, and I serve as a member of the steering committee representing San Diego from my hometown down here in the Little Italy neighborhood of the city, where sometimes we are interrupted by fire engines and airplanes, so I will mute myself as well. In keeping with current practice, I will also say that I use she, her pronouns and reside on lands taken from the Kumeyaay people, also known as the Tipayabai people. And as I also reported last month, I am pleased to note that I am now served by the Community Choice Program of San Diego Community Power. Hooray. And thank you for all of the efforts by many San Diego activists over 10 years almost to make that happen. So we've talked about the mission. We've talked about introducing ourselves, most of us. I think, see, we have a Reclaim Our Power person, whether that's Pete or Mary Rose or Shayna, I don't know. Hopefully you will unmute and say hello. Our topic this month continues a theme that we've been developing over the last 2 previous months. And the sort of general theme has ended up being obstacles to equity in different aspects of our clean energy world. So far, we've covered in March, we looked at the technical barriers to energy resilience. We had Ali Ditrio join us as our speaker. And she examined the many barriers that the current electricity system places in front of community scale microgrids. Big topic. Those barriers are very real. And we saw then, and these that basically sort of make it impossible, virtually impossible for us and for our communities to build the kind of resilient, robust, decentralized energy system that we so badly need to withstand the ravages of the climate emergency ahead. So that was March. Then last month, our topic looked at another form of barriers to equity in energy resilience. And we invited Gina Kim of Communities for a Better Environment, and also welcomed Mary Rose Taruk for commentary on this topic as well. And they looked at barriers that face members of our communities when they go to apply for funding to build a microgrid through a state agency grant program. The structural barriers that are built into these programs end up disproportionately impeding the same people, the same grant applicants that these programs say they want to help. So now in this third call, we're tying some of these pieces together. Today's discussion is back on the future of the grid, which we've explored in these calls before. And this time we're returning to the Commission's proceeding known as the High DER Future Proceeding. And basically, to remind us all what the CPUC means by this is when the grid has a lot of decentralized energy resources on it, what will be the role of the players, namely the utilities and other players, particularly those operating decentralized energy systems, as we would like to do. For us, though, this docket is again about equity and power. The questions are nothing less than who will operate the distribution system in the future and by what rules. It's a docket that's vital to all of our interests, as you will have heard previously on this call, and you will hear again. So in what are still the early stages of track 2, where these issues of grid control are being debated, it's vital that communities have a choice. Al's announcement for this call also included a proposal that the Alliance helped to develop with our speakers today that emphasizes exactly how important it is for real community stakeholders to be involved in a meaningful way in this critical discussion. And in today's call, we do have two people with whom we have worked closely in leading the charge on this battle. So our plan for the hour is, first, I'm going to introduce our two speakers. Then they will each walk through a few slides that they've used to make these points to the CPUC. Our first speaker is April Rose Maurath Sommer. April is the Executive Director and Legal Director of the Wild Tree Foundation. Wild Tree is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to protection of our environment, climate, and wildlife. And a number of other good things on your website, April. And when I looked at them, I went, yes, we support all of that stuff. Before Wild Tree, April was Executive Director and Lead Counsel at Protect Our Communities Foundation. And before that, she was a staff attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity. 3 awesome organizations. And a wonderful lead to our second speaker, Roger Lynn. Roger is a senior attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity, and Roger works in the center's energy justice program, advocating for an equitable, clean energy future. Prior to joining the center, Roger worked with environmental justice organizations throughout California, and he serves on California's Disadvantaged Communities Advisory Group. Please take it away, both of you. I'd like to make sure we start Q&A whenever you're done, closer to 12:35 than 12:45, but in any event, we'll have plenty of time. April, thank you, and please take it away.
Sure. Hello, and thank you for the introduction, Erica. I'm going to pull up the presentation here. Yeah, so I think, Erica, you, I unfortunately have not been on the last few calls, so I have not been part of the series on equity, but I would kind of broadly describe this as a discussion of a particular proceeding at the Public Utilities Commission, but also really a proceeding that's emblematic of the problems of communities and stakeholders being able to access the Public Utilities Commission and really being able to genuinely participate and be part of the decision-making process that happens over there. So I'm going to run through the slide deck, and this is a presentation that we put together, and I'm not sure Erica mentioned, but Wild Tree is working very closely with the Alliance in this. We're working as partners. Everything we're doing in this is together, and it's been great. I'm so lucky to work with Erica and Ali because they're so brilliant. But we are also seeking to have a broader coalition of folks regarding that have some equity voices. So you can see a bunch of logos here. This was a presentation that was made at a workshop that was supposed to be about stakeholder engagement. And in the process of determining if we can have a different type of distributed system operator, if we can look at the grid differently. And stakeholder engagement is just especially important in this proceeding, seeing that the stakeholders are those that are providing distributed energy resources, the communities, individuals, small businesses. And so unfortunately, the Commission's effort so far at engaging stakeholders has not been great. We're seeing some glimmers of hope. But this presentation I'm going to flip through was put together in response to a consultant's proposal for how the Commission will address stakeholder engagement. The consultant, which is GridWorks in this case, which is an organization basically made up of past PUC staff and even commissioners, Commissioner Florio in particular. And they put together a white paper proposal, and our response was, this is a disaster. This is not going to, what has been proposed is not going to accomplish meaningful and useful stakeholder engagement. And so we're glad to get a lot of other organizations supporting our proposal and joining us. So towards a high DER future, a community stakeholder focused alternative proposal. So the DSO white paper is the consultant's work, and this was it's an interesting white paper. It's described as being an on-ramp to stakeholder participation, and it's the typical consultant work coming out of the PUC that is basically completely ineligible. I think Erica, Al, and I, and Roger, and many who are very well versed, very sophisticated in participating at the PUC and have a understanding of these issues, didn't have the complete understanding of what much of this paper was talking about. So it's something that's been written in a ways that's just extremely inaccessible to the communities that should be engaged in this process. One thing that is particularly distressing is that the PUC has put some effort into having an environmental and social justice commitment. They have a framework for how environmental and social justice is supposed to be taken into consideration in all of their proceedings. And it's something it's just been totally ignored in what has been put together for the proposal for stakeholder engagement here. I would like to say that this is a proposal coming from the consultants that was not for stakeholder engagement, but was really for consultant engagement. The consultants cease to view themselves, I would say, as the gatekeepers, and there's not a proposal for there being a direct voice insofar as there being comments on the record and proposals that are accepted directly from stakeholders. This is something that's would all be filtered through the consultant. So we've got an alternate proposal, and there were 5 recommendations, and I'll flip through these quickly. And I apologize, I'm not sure with the group, how much knowledge you have of this particular proceeding. So it's likely I'm either talking about something unfamiliar or that you're much more familiar with me. So hopefully for some of you, I can hit a middle ground there. So our first recommendation is, the commission needs to go back to the drawing board and come up with a guiding document for how stakeholders will be engaged that really accomplishes in making this an open and inviting proceeding for more than just the usual folks that you see at the Public Utilities Commission. So our second recommendation is that, which seems very common sense, very basic, but something that seemed to have been totally missed, is that we need to start off with defining the objectives. What are the objectives of seeking the commission is seeking to accomplish in track 2? What are the objectives in seeking to analyze and take alternate proposals for different DSO models? And this is a step that's just been totally hopped over. So our proposal is you've got to start first with objectives. You have to lay the foundation for what for how communities will be engaged and why they should be part of this process. Our third recommendation is improving the California process. So this comes from, there's been a small number of efforts around the world to make changes to DSO models and looking for attempts at a different model than what we're currently operating here, which is basically complete reliance on the investor-owned utilities. So there's been some efforts in New York, Australia, and the United Kingdom. Generally, in the white paper, those were heavily relied upon as examples that should be followed. And unfortunately, none of those efforts accomplished the type of change that we hope to see in California. And they all took a really long time. I think they're all about 5 years. So we're hoping that something's happened in this proceeding quicker than 5 years. But yeah, we're just encouraging the Public Utilities Commission to innovate and do this proceeding differently, for hopefully for a different result than has been done in other places. Our specific recommendations on exactly how the process should occur is we've got 5 different workshops that we've proposed. The first one is a stakeholder engagement workshop to actually have a work product that there's plan for who should be engaged, who they should determine who should be engaged, how that engagement should happen, how that engagement is used. And then, of course, starting off with objectives, setting objectives, following this by some workshops on requirements to remove barriers and achieve these objectives. And then a workshop on operations and functions for meeting the requirements identified needed to remove barriers. And finally, roles and responsibilities of the grid operator and other parties needed to carry out essential operations. The kind of final product that we would like to see happen is that stakeholders who have been funded to participate in this work are able to directly bring proposals for a different way of looking at how the distribution system is operated. So that's kind of the end game, but to get there, it's really important, and this is a really big problem at the Commission, is workshops are often used as a way to not create a robust record. Workshops are usually not recorded. It happens in a vacuum. And in this proceeding so far, there has been the white paper produced by the consultant. There was a workshop where there were a number of parties that provided proposals. There were comments, pre and post workshop comments. And at this point, none of those things have been placed on the record. We did have a call with staff recently, and we got some good news. The assigned commission to this case is Commissioner Hauk. And her staff has indicated that, and I see this is directly responsive to the effort that we put out there to actually put all of that content on the record. So I think that's a kind of exciting step in the right direction, that there's openness from the Commission to, at least insofar as record development, to do this the right way and not just have all of this work and effort, kind of be operating in a vacuum. And that's the the end of the presentation here. But yeah, I'm going to pass it off to Roger, and Roger's going to talk more specifically about some of the recommendations for how stakeholder engagement should happen. But at this point in the proceeding, there's been a lot of work that has already come out from the small number of stakeholders that are engaged at this point, but there's a lot to do. There what we've seen with the white paper proposal and what's happened so far in the proceeding, is seeing things not heading in the right direction, but there's some glimmer of hope that our proposal is something that has already, I think, had an impact on what they're doing, and hopefully will continue to be impactful in changing the direction that the commission is going in this proceeding by relying on its usual business as usual approach of sidelining the communities and individuals and that really need to be involved here. So I will stop sharing the screen, and Roger, I don't know if you had a screen share or if you are just going to be talking.
Thanks, April. Our slides, and this is the best part of working with Al and April, and this is that, and Erica, is that our slides are incredibly similar, and we didn't plan it that way, but it ended up being very, very similar. And I think because of that, well, I'm not going to show slides. I'm just going to ramble at you all. Because of that, I do think April was right. We made a fairly big splash at that first workshop. What happens next, I think, is still up in the air. I don't want to claim victory at all yet, but we have made quite a big splash by having such a coordinated message. So no slides from me. I'm just going to launch off of what April was talking about and discuss what our next steps are, what we're hoping to get out of the Commission for Community Engagement. The reason community engagement is so important, let's just put the environmental justice principles aside for a second. And I want to take you all back to, and anyone, please interrupt me at any point with any questions or comments. If I want this to be as free flowing as possible. I don't want to give anyone PTSD right now, but does anyone remember Verdant Consultants from a recent battle related to solar? So they were the ones who made the look back study for the NEM 2.0 review. The look back study, which completely undervalued the value of solar, in part by ignoring certain community benefits, such as resiliency and other social costs that are very pertinent to our communities. So those are the folks that the PUC has again retained to be the consultants to figure out community engagement. So I'll say that again, the folks who disregarded community benefits in one of the biggest debates recently with solar are the ones who are the ones now saying, don't worry, we'll do community engagement to figure out what the community needs are. I think they're staying away from the word benefit, but they're trying to figure out what the community needs are. Exactly what April was saying, that's important because when we are designing a DSO model, we have to work from, the analogy or the example we've been giving, or the hypothetical we've been giving is pretend it's 2040. And, to get to SB 100 by 2045, who are the folks who have not been served yet? And why not start with those folks? And if we don't start with their needs, then we're going to design a system where we're going to be like, oh shit, when it comes to 2040, and we realize the system can't serve those needs at all. So this really is about equity and meeting our climate goals as well, because 100% means 100%, and we're not going to get there without meeting those that are lost in the queue. So the question we're trying to figure out, though, and this is very new, is how do we engage those communities? And how do we do community engagement to actually build things and to meet the needs of the folks who are at the end of the queue right now? This is a new level of community engagement that we've been talking with the Public Utilities Commission. Would love to get the group's thoughts on this after I ramble on for a bit more. But we've been talking with staff at the Public Utilities Commission Office of Local Government Engagement. We've been talking with staff at Energy Division. I've been talking with CEC staff. No one has done community engagement in the way that we're talking about, if we have to just hit the go button and say, okay, we have all of these great programs that can target disadvantaged communities. How do we get them into those communities? Who do we engage to put those in those communities? And not ignoring the funding barrier. You know, there are some loan programs that can happen right now where you can own an energy system and the loan system repays it. So not even worrying about financial barrier. Imagine if there are really great programs, how do we then put those in disadvantaged communities? I want to contrast that with the existing community engagement that we've been used to over the last couple of years. And I was in a prior world was working on the San Joaquin Valley proceeding at the PUC, which I think many of you have heard about and we use as a model for community engagement. But that one only covers one side of it, which is community engagement being CBOs being the middle person between the regulators and the community residents. You know, so filling out forms, helping folks sign up for certain things on an individual basis. But on the other end of the spectrum is something that is completely untouched and new, which is like, okay, well, who are the entities we have to engage to actually put things like community solar in a community? And, you know, we have for those of you in Richmond, the Rise Center, I think is an amazing example of something that could happen. But what if there's no CBE? Like what about the other hundreds, thousands of communities in California that don't have a Communities for a Better Environment or an APEN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network? Like, how do we actually go about like identifying how to reach out to those folks when we have great programs available? So that is a big question that we have to answer. I think funding is going to be a big issue. So the three things that I'll end soon, but the three big next steps that we're trying to figure out to make this happen are: first, funding. You're going to need a lot of funding to make this happen. The second is the invitees. Who do we invite to the table? We're going to need the traditional CBOs to help us get there. But at the end of the day, who are the other folks in a community that can actually help get some energy systems built? It could be schools, it could be churches, it could be local clinics. You know, who has land, who has roofs big enough to house community solar or space for electric vehicle charging stations or whatnot, or electric school buses? Who are those entities and how do we get those folks? Who else should be at the table? And then finally, to go back to April's point as well, community engagement plan. We want this to cover this proceeding, and we're targeting this proceeding as well because this proceeding deals with all of the cool gadgets that we can hopefully get. And on that note, if you look at the folks who are last in line, there was a great report out of Berkeley relatively recently about the inequality in the grid. And some parts of the grid are just in such bad shape that it's going to be completely cost ineffective, even considering non-energy benefits and social costs. It's going to be completely cost ineffective to repair those parts of the grid, which is when DERs become potentially one of the most viable solutions there is. So a lot that we're targeting this proceeding because it deals with all of the potential resources that we can get to serve these communities. We need all of these efforts documented in the plan, exactly what April was saying. If it's in a workshop, it's just said and it just goes into the ether. Like, how do we, actually document this so we can hold the PUC accountable to these efforts in the future, not just with this proceeding, but hopefully even beyond this proceeding as well. So those are the three things. The funding is very important to figure out who. The second thing, the invitees are, who else should be at the table to figure out community engagement. And then finally, to document it all in a community engagement plan. I am going to, working at the center with April, I think I was thinking about how we're going to roll this out. And I think it's very important to divide the labor. I think leaning on the Alliance to help with that community engagement effort, I think is very important to get enough folks energized about it. And then you can leave the annoying legal hooks to April and me and others to figure out the funding piece. And also the weird procedural things that we have to deal with to get through this maze of PUC proceedings. And the last thing I'll say on that funding, I did want to compare the funding out there for the status quo and the funding for community engagement. And this is stuff that I've been looking at closely. To put it on everyone's flag, there is a workshop June 1st at the CEC to deals with the CEC's parallel proceeding on a high DER future. I'll make sure that you will receive the information about that workshop after this. But one thing that I'm preparing for that workshop is comparing the amount of funding that goes to the status quo with the amount of funding that goes to community engagement efforts. The rule in 2014, there was a ruling from the PUC that authorized $4 million for us to figure out a high DER future. We recently found out that $4 million has been spent on consultants, including Verdant, who ignored community benefits recently. And also I wanted to, if folks know about the procurement review group as well, they're a group that's set up by the utilities to review procurement decisions. They are paid at the intervenor compensation rate. Last year, Turn received $100,000 from that effort, just for going to meetings to talk about procurement decisions that have already happened. So that's the status quo. We have intervenor compensation, so all of us are funding it for the utilities to do their status quo. We have the $4 million that was already spent. So we have that on the status quo side. On the community engagement side, at the advisory group, we get a per diem. $15 per meeting. No one applies for it because no one can be bothered to do the paperwork for that $15. So that's our advisory group. We have a crappy per diem. In the San Joaquin Valley proceeding, we were promised to get funding for community engagement. It took 5 years to get that award for 2 organizations. One organization that did the community engagement still hasn't received the funding, in large part because of a protest from the Public Advocate's Office, very closely linked to the PUC. So ICOP now is out of the window and practically zeroed out. Because of that experience with the Public Advocate's Office, a community engagement funding pilot program was created by the PUC. Recently, when the May revise came out saying that there was $30 million available for community engagement, the PUC just canceled work on that pilot program. So that's done. So again, on the one side, and you will get more of this on June 1st, we have $4 million intervenor compensation. On the other side, $15 per diem, nothing else. So, just to give you a picture of what we're playing with. But on that note, though, again, I'll end with 3 things for community engagement. Have to get the funding. It's just not going to happen without the funding properly. Who new should be at the table? How do we actually build stuff? How do we get stuff in the ground? And then document this all in a plan that's subject to public comment and public review. Thank you for the time, and sorry for rambling, but I hope it spurs great discussion.
I will end by thanking you all for participating in the conversation and ask you to stay tuned for the June statewide call. Please visit us on the web and feel free to tell your colleagues, friends, neighbors of any interested parties with a similar mindset to feel free to check us out and join the Alliance so that we can continue to grow stronger. Thank you very much. And it's just 1 o'clock, so that will conclude the recording and the show for today. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Roger and April.